Welcome to Art Nomad. Here we explore the art world from every angle, the artists, the ideas, the movements that matter. Whether we're unearthing stories from the past, unpacking what's happening right now, or imagining what's coming next, this podcast shares experiences that help shape our creative culture. I'm Eric, and this week's theme is Storm. My guest is New York artist Sage Gallen. He is a painter, a poet, a music producer, an author, a recording artist, and filmmaker. That's right. This guy wears many hats, but I'll tell you what, he wears them incredibly well. Now, to call Sage's life a storm would be a bit of an understatement. Actually, yeah, in fact, I would call his life a category 5 hurricane. And I say that because his journey from homelessness, addiction, and prostitution turned around, and he was named one of the 40 Black artists to watch in 2014. Now that is quite a hurricane of a story. But before we get into that, I want to take a step back into time and tell you a story from 1816. It's the story of Medusa. This is not the mythical creature with snakes for hair. This is the French naval ship that goes by the same name as it set sail to recolonize Senegal. Now, the captain of that ship was a royal appointee, and he hadn't sailed for over 20 years. And due to poor navigation, he crashed the Medusa off the coast of West Africa. Now, when they deployed the lifeboats, they realized that there wasn't enough space for the 400 passengers. So they had to build this makeshift raft. And on that raft, they ended up putting 147 people. The idea was that they would take the 6 lifeboats and tow the raft to safety. However, they weren't making the progress that they wanted to. And so the captain decided to cut the line and abandon the raft to drift out in the open sea with no forms of navigation, nothing. And you can imagine what happened next. The chaos broke out on the raft as everyone jockeyed for survival. And by nightfall, 20 people had already died. A few days later, when they were left without food or water, the survivors resorted to eating the dead in order to try to stay alive. After 13 days, a ship found the raft by accident. And by that time, there were only 15 survivors. The French painter, Theodore Géricault, was infatuated and obsessed with this story. He researched it to no end. He interviewed every single survivor. He rebuilt the raft in his studio. He even went to the morgue and brought home severed limbs so that he could study the effects of skin decay on the body and understand the coloring and the texturing so he could paint it perfectly. Now, that kind of passion and obsession materialized in what's called the Raft of Medusa, a painting that rejected the calm and orderly style of neoclassicism and instead depicted chaos and suffering. If you look at the painting, you can see some people are praying, some have given up, there are some about to die, there are others fighting for survival. There are even a couple there that have turned to cannibalism. Like, it's all there. And the painting is huge. It's 16 feet by 24 feet. And if you stand next to it, the figures are actually twice life size. And that was done on purpose. And it was a new technique that Géricault employed. And his idea was that he wanted to thrust the dying bodies and the chaos into the viewer's personal space. Now, when the painting finally debuted in Paris, it was not liked at all. It was actually hated. But regardless of the critics and what people thought, that painting was a political statement that hung larger than life for all of France to confront. And confront it they did. Even to this day, it's a powerful reminder of that wrongdoing. And I'd say, if you're in Paris, take a trip over to the Louvre, and by all means say hi to the Mona Lisa. But if you want a truly haunting experience, turn your gaze toward the Medusa and let that storm of a painting suck you in. You'll thank me later. And now, Let us jump into our interview with the wonderful and talented hurricane that is Sage Gallen. All right, Sage, welcome.
Thank you.
Let's jump right into it. So we're both here in New York, and we've had a couple massive storms last week or so. How are you dealing with that?
I absolutely love it. It's great for me in that I love the snow. I lived in LA for 24 years, so this is my first real being back home. This is the first real snowstorm. We've had snow before, but this is my first major blizzard.
Oh, I see. But also we talked, and you mentioned that you were heading into the storm. You were like,
Yeah, yeah.
I'm going straight into it. Why was
Yeah,
that?
the day of the blizzard, I woke up at 4:40 a.m., looked out of the window and saw the blizzard and was like, wow, this is beautiful. Let me get my camera and my keys. And I got to stay out for about an hour, walking around 125th Street, taking pictures, and decided to come home when I couldn't feel my fingers anymore. So
Do you happy with the photos you got?
I was very happy with them. You could take 100 pictures and, get one really good one. And that's a success.
Right, exactly. Now, the theme of this podcast is storm. Nothing to do with the storm we're in or with you heading into the storm. It's actually chosen because your life's been a bit of a wild bomb. And it's caused some wreckage and some destruction, and it's sort of it's gone all over the place. But in the end, it's kind of left some light in its wreckage, and
Hmm.
and I really like that as a metaphor for your life and also your influences in the way the stuff is stormy as well. And just to give people a bit of context, right? You were raised in a commune. Um, which helped people with drug addiction. You left that and then became a drug addict. Um, you were homeless for a while. You had to sell your body as a prostitute. And then at one point, you tried to kill yourself. And somehow you then flipped everything around and became, if I recall correctly, one of the 40 black artists to watch labeled by NBC, right? And
Yeah.
I'm curious that like that cyclone of madness, how did you deal with it? And B, um, do you feel like you're still in that cyclone? Like, is it now a healthy cyclone?
Well, I was born in Wyandanch, Long Island. My parents were both kids when they had me. And my mom was sent to Synanon, the commune I grew up in my formative years, 1972. So I spent 2 years with the absence of my mother. My dad had been drafted to Vietnam, and when I was brought to Synanon and introduced to my mother, it was just a really interesting kind of phenomena. Now, being in this commune, which I am supremely grateful for because it really constructed a large part of the foundation of who I am as a human being. We left Synanon in 1979. My mom and her then husband had a very tumultuous relationship. So, coming out of that experience and being thrusted into a new reality, it was complicated and really traumatic for me. And I started doodling it around that time of my life. I was like 9, 10 years old, where I
Mm.
started drawing a lot just for salvation. I grew up in a town called Hempstead in Long Island, predominantly working middle class, very connected, and I had a lot of friends who were just their families kind of adopted me. We all looked out for one another. But both of my parents by this time had fallen back into a reality that included drugs and alcohol. And I was venomously against those things growing up as a kid. So I tried to divert the other way. I tried to pivot the other way where, I was in track and swimming team, the diving team. I made counties my first year. I was editor of the yearbook. I was junior class president. I graduated the top 10 percentile of my class. I was prom king. And I was also a very bougie, kind of a snob of a human being. Not that I was intentionally ugly, but I wasn't very nice. And then I was introduced to drugs, and one thing led to another, and I was introduced to crack cocaine. I was working 3 jobs at the time, and the people who introduced it to me told me it wasn't crack because I was very specific. They said, "Yeah, you want to try this?" And I said, as long as it's not crack, I'll try anything. 3 months later, I found out I was smoking crack. And by that time, I had lost 2 of the 3 jobs I was holding. My apartment in Brooklyn, I had lost that. And I was living on the streets. And that's, doing things in adult bookstores. And I was a horrible, horrible prostitute. I mean, I, I wasn't very good at that.
What made you such a bad prostitute?
Um, it seemed crazy to me. Like, there's at the time New York was a very different place, and there was an adult bookstore on the corner of 36th and 8th Avenue, and I would get my drugs over there, and then you have these little booths that you could go into and put $1 in the machine, and you could get high in those booths, or have sex or do whatever.
It was
And
cheap. It was cheap privacy,
it
right?
was cheap. Exactly. It was very cheap privacy.
Hmm.
And it was funny to me because, when you run out of drugs, then what else? You need more money. And there were people there who you knew were, you know, guys going back to Long Island to their wife and kids who needed to relieve or do whatever. And you just take $20 and do what you need to do in order to get that $20 and go buy
Hmm.
more drugs. It was a cycle. And within the course of 1 year, almost to the day, I had gone from having 3 jobs to picking out of a garbage can in Penn Station to sleeping on 8th Avenue to being enveloped by the darkness and the pain of addiction. And, I had become the person I swore I would never be as a kid. Like I said, I was prom king. Having grown up in Synanon, having a family unit that was so strong and so influential in my life, I always had a basement in my depravity. There were things that I knew that I couldn't do. Being a prostitute, somebody give you a blowjob is a blowjob, but it's a job, as opposed to I was never the person who could knock an old lady over upside her head and steal her pocketbook. I was never that person. I was never that person who could stand in Port Authority with a cup in his hand saying, spare change. I was never that person. And, everyone has their own cycle, everyone has their own way of doing things. I'm not dissing or downing people who do those things. But I always felt like, in terms of the prostitution thing, that at least I was earning something. They were getting something in exchange for giving me something. And so I always looked at it from a perspective of a job. Although I was terrible at it, it didn't really last long. But, you find yourself doing things in addiction that you wouldn't typically do. The blessing of that in terms of the storm, now that seems to the observer as a monsoon. For me, in retrospect, is a blessing because, like I said, growing up, I wasn't kind to people who I thought were beneath me until I became the person that I would have considered to be beneath me.
Hmm.
And what I got to realize or got to understand is how we dehumanize one another, how we trivialize each other's pain. So I got to learn in that storm, I got to learn what empathy and was or is. I got to understand better how to value people. Every storm isn't just about destruction. Sometimes it's about clearing away. Sometimes it's about revealing. Sometimes it's about surviving,
Hmm.
you know.
You mentioned you weren't great at prostitution. What did you do to get away from that?
I would go to these bars in DC and kind of either steal drinks or When people would go to the bathroom, I would take their drink, or if they used their cup as an ashtray, I would just pull the cigarette out and drink. And I used to sit at the bars in hopes that somebody would be kind enough to offer me a drink that didn't have cigarettes in it. And I would just draw. I would doodle a lot. There was this old dude, this guy who he worked at Howard University. He was an artist, and he saw me doodling, and we became friends. And his name is Walter Neal. And Walter saw that I had some talent, that I could doodle, I could draw. And he took me to the art supply store and bought me $100 worth of art supplies. And I was always, and this was the thing, although I drew with the number two pencil, I never painted before. And here's this guy buying me up like $100 worth of paint and acrylics and watercolors and canvases. And that helped a lot in terms of redirecting that pain or giving me an outlet which didn't require me to hurt myself further. And not that I was sober by any stretch of the imagination, I wasn't.
Mm.
But, it gave me an outlet to start doing other things like getting a job. And I worked at some bars in DC. And through that, some people from the trans community offered to give me a housing or take me in without expectations of sex, money, or drugs. They saw a broken person and took me in. And then I started working at Howard University in the catering department. So, I was still not sober at that time, but I wasn't in the position of having to do things with strangers like I had in the past.
Right. Got it. And at that time, when the trans community brought you in and you got that job at Howard University, is that when you started then painting and started, I guess, quote, doing art?
Yeah, well, it was this still the time. Oh, I was a stripper too when I was working in bars. Yeah, that was fun actually. My stripper name was Onyx because it was a hard black rock. Um,
Onyx, that's great. How did that work? Were you working at a bar that had
Yeah,
stripping?
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I was working at I got a job. See, I was homeless, sleeping in abandoned buildings. This guy I was hanging out with had a meeting at one of the bars, and I went with him. And I'm sitting in the space waiting for them to finish their meeting, and I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore. And told the manager, hey, I need a job. He hired me as a bar back. I exceeded in that, so I moved up to a waiter. Then they had strippers, so I was like, oh, that looks like fun because I used to be a dancer. So, I just did that and it was great.
When you were on stage stripping, did it feel like an artistic performance in any way, or was it like you said, like was it a job?
No, no, that's all it was to me was a creative expression. I loved it for that reason because it was, and like I said, I was a professional dancer. Like when,
Mm.
my friends and I, we used to go to the sound factory and just people would move out of our section or out of our area. We're dancing with Jennifer Lopez and Madonna. They're coming into our space where, two of the crew went on to dance with Janet, to be in Janet Jackson's thing. So, we danced.
Got it. Let's let's jump back to the very beginning because I should say that I was in Synanon, the commune as well.
Mhm.
And you and I actually moved in at roughly around the same time. And we were both very young. And I agree with you that those formative years shaped me in a very positive way. You left when you were 9. I stayed much longer until I was 18. But I remember those young years. I do remember you and I finding an arrowhead in
Mhm.
Walker Creek. I do remember that. It was really kind of this amazing thing that they had these artifacts, which were art in a way, like this was a pristine. I want to say onyx. I mean, I don't know what the stone was. It was a black arrowhead, but it was beautiful and it wasn't chipped. It was perfect. It was so amazing that you just found that amongst all the other rocks. But that's a whole different story. I think for me, being young in the commune, we were exposed to so much art. and so much freedom to express it. And I'm just curious, did you feel like A, you were artistic, or B, you were being exposed to art at that young age in Synanon?
I think that it was just so natural that it was such an integrated part of growing up that it wasn't like you're realizing something. I think looking back in retrospect, I have a different appreciation with that exposure, with that openness. I know when we left Synanon, we moved to Harlem briefly for like 6 months. They put me in a Catholic school. This kid, couple of desks down, took a nap, and I wanted to take a nap too. So I put my head down and took a nap. And the next thing I know, I'm awakened by this hard, loud sound of a ruler being smacked against my flesh.
Hmm.
Coming out of this commune, what I said to this nun was, "Hey, lady, you are super uptight. You need to get laid." And, that was a Synanon is like for me. It was that openness and and because we were exposed to so much that there wasn't like I didn't know what racism was. I didn't know what misogyny was. Um, we were encouraged to question and to explore. We were encouraged to explore, to find arrowheads and white water rafting down the creek when it flooded, or although the adults had a fit with that one, but
But
we
we
were,
had so much space.
we,
We had
yeah,
acres upon acres upon acres to
yeah,
explore.
yeah. I mean, our backyard were
It was
acres of hills and
yeah.
and land and property. Our family was 500 people of every walk of life. So being exposed or having that to be your foundation of your formative years definitely informed everything else.
Hey, can you
Yeah,
hear the
yeah,
drilling?
yeah.
Think we're gonna have to pause because
Okay.
I can't deal with that. All right, I am taking a break from the construction noise that's going on across the hall, and I'm here with my neighbor, Robert Whitman. I wanted to ask him a couple questions and just get his point of view because Robert's such an interesting photographer, fascinating person. Robert, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right. We have had some big storms this year in New York. Is there anything that you remember from the big storms this year?
This was one of the worst experiences I've ever had. I was at the corner of where I live, and I stepped in some ice water or whatever it was, and my whole body got entrapped by this, by the snow. It was way up to my waist, and I was trying to get out, and I couldn't. It was just like being, I don't know, just paralyzed. I couldn't move. And luckily, somebody walked by and he helped me. He put his arms around my chest and started pulling me out. And I got out and then had to go all the way home with no shoes or anything.
So your shoes got left in the snow back there.
My shoes got left, and it was totally like being in quicksand. I mean, I've never been in quicksand, but
That must have been really frightening. Was that frightening?
yeah, it was crazy. I mean, and I couldn't move my feet, and I kept going down.
Yeah, that's hard.
Yeah, and then I remember I was lying with my face against the snow, and I really felt like, and there was nobody on the street because it was the big snowstorm. Nobody on the street, and I really felt like my time had come.
Yeah, but someone came and helped you, right?
It helped me out. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. Oh, that's really hard. That's a tough story, Robert. All right. What was your most stormy relationship?
I would say every one of my relationships were stormy, are stormy.
Which one was the biggest storm?
I would say with my second wife, who was a dancer, and dancers are very particular about everything. And I think that was a big relationship, a big problem. One of my favorite pictures of all time, and that's with everybody, is when Shelley, her name's Shelley Washington, we had a big fight, and I picked up my little camera, and she had the pillows all over her head, and it was, and then I just took a picture of it. I thought it was cool, and turns out that everybody thinks this is one of the top photos that I've ever taken.
That's great. I would love to see that photo. That was good. Oh. Hold on one second. Robert just told me it's this one. Let me jump over here. It's right behind us, actually. You've probably seen it when I've been pointing at Robert. But there it is. Pillows over her head. It is nice, very nice. And he stormed out of the room. See, you've probably seen that photo in the background as we talk. Yeah, it's right there. All right. If you were a devastating storm, what would you destroy?
I would say politicians.
And why would you destroy politicians?
Because I don't think they're cool at all.
Is there any such thing as a perfect storm?
Yes. I think when you see a golfer and he hits a beautiful shot and it goes on the green and it goes in the hole, this could be a perfect storm.
It's a nice analogy. I like it. How do you best capture chaos in a still photograph?
I think everybody running around in circles, always running around in circles and circles. I like to put the camera on a very slow shutter speed and move with the action.
Robert, I wanted to thank you very much for the interview. I appreciate your time always. You're a wonderful person, wonderful human being. And thank you again for your time.
Oh, thank you. And this is, you are so great. And I want to thank you for even giving me the opportunity to talk with you.
Thank you. All right. We're going to peace out. Okay. I'm now going to jump back into our interview with Sage Gallen. When we left off, we were talking a bit about the art world, being homeless, the differences in that, or comparing the two a bit. And you told me that you were standing on a sidewalk thinking about ending your life. Was that when you were homeless? Can you put that in a moment of time in your
That was
timeline?
early 90s. I guess I remember the day. I just can't remember the year I was introduced to crack. But almost a year to the day is when my mom shipped me out to Maryland to the rehab. But before that happened, I pretty much slept on 8th or lived on 8th Avenue on the streets and would sleep in Penn Station or trains or subways or whatever. And I had been up for quite a few days, running back and forth, getting high. And I was in a lot of pain, and I'll never forget. It was early in the morning, and the whisper of New York, not yet the scream or yell of New York, but just the whisper. And I was standing. It's funny, we're picking back up on this because I was there today on 36th Street and 8th Avenue, and I was in a lot of pain, and I just wanted to end the pain, to make it stop. And like I said, it was early in the morning, and there was a big truck down, I guess probably around, I saw it around 28th Street, I guess it would have been. And it was just barreling down the street. And I was looking at this truck, calculating how I could just jump in front of it and all my pain would be gone. And so my eyes are fixated on this truck, and I'm easing closer and closer to the street. And the storefront behind me is starting to open. You could hear the wrought iron gate kind of jostling upward. But I was so fixated on this truck I could hear the music playing behind me, but I was really not listening to it. I could hear it, but I wasn't listening to it. And I was just thinking, watching the truck as it picked up speed, and thinking all I have to do is take one step because it was closer to my side of the street. And all I would have had to do is jump. And I wouldn't have felt anything. I would have been successful in ending the pain, my life. But this song, this music was playing, and I could hear it, and it was la 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 da 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 da, and I'm looking at the truck coming faster and faster down the street, and I'm easing closer to the street from the off of the sidewalk. When I get to the gutter, da 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 da, and then this voice comes on, and it's Seal singing "Kiss from a Rose," and I'm pretty sure that was my first time hearing it, and somehow that song, his voice, that melody just reached inside of me and like embraced me. It grabbed me. It held me. And I'm listening to the song, and I'm hearing the song and the lyrics. And by the time the song finished, the truck had long passed, and I was literally laying on the street in tears.
So after the tears, did you feel like you had to
No,
change? That you had to do something, or what happened after that?
I probably got high.
Okay.
I didn't have spiritual or emotional intelligence to recognize that entree to transformation at that time.
Yeah. Do you have like today? Do you have a special relationship with the Seal song?
It's funny. When I moved to Los Angeles, there was a party thrown by one of my closest friends, Carla Radford, and Kodada Jones, Quincy Jones's daughter, at the Peterson Automotive Museum. That party is most famously known for the spot where Biggie Smalls was murdered, which was
Mm.
ironic because I was talking to Chris like 30 minutes before his killing. But it was a huge party, and it was like the Soul Train Music Award after party or whatever, and everybody was there, like all of these celebrities and stars and actors and rappers, and everybody was there. It was amazing. And Seal came in, and this was like the height of his popularity.
Mm.
Excuse me. And I've never been enamored by celebrity. So I've never been I really don't care how much money someone has or how famous someone is. I care about, are you a good person or not? That's my predicate.
Yeah.
But Seal walks in, and he's mobbed, like it's just a swarm of people, and these are all other celebrities like himself. And he comes in, and I'm standing behind the crowd, and this guy is standing next to me, and I'm like, it's funny because that guy saved my life. And he said, "What do you mean he saved your life?" And I told him the story about the truck and the song. And
Mm.
what I didn't know was that he was a friend of Seal's. So he literally grabs me and pulls me through the crowd to Seal. And then Kofi says, "Tell him what you just told me." So I got the opportunity to actually share that story with Seal. And of course we were both like, "Yeah, that's a great story, man."
Got it. Okay, so you went from that near death experience to then being named one of the 40 black artists to watch back in 2014
Mhm.
by NBC. Chart me through that vortex or that 180 flip.
What broke the cycle was I was staying at this time on a friend's couch, like 36 in Normandy. I was working for this outreach organization, Minority AIDS Project. So we went to nightclubs, we went to sex clubs, we went everywhere to pass out condoms and information about HIV. All of the areas we went to facilitated drugs and alcohol. And I had a friend that I had worked with who would pick me up and take me to our sites that we would go to. And he dropped me off one night after work, and I was I was knocked out. I was so drunk, obliterated. Is it? Is
Obliterated.
obliterated? I was obliterated. And I remember him saying, and I was, this is after my mother kicked me out of her house and I'm back in LA and I hadn't used drugs, but I was drunk as hell. And he said, Michael said, if you keep drinking like this, you're going to get high again. And I was belligerent. I was very upset with that statement. How dare you say that to me? I haven't got used drugs in 2 weeks since being back and blah, blah, blah. And sure enough, the next week I got paid on Friday, went to the bar, got drunk, and sure enough, ended up using it. And I went back to the house I was staying at and crashed. And I guess like Monday afternoon when I came to, I had written out like this 3-page letter to Michael, who I knew was sober. And I pick up the phone and I call his number and the phone rings. He answers, and that 3-page monologue was converted into 2 words, help me. And Michael said, meet me at this church Friday evening on Adams and try not to drink or use between now and then. And I went that week and without drinking or using, met him at the church. And that began my first sobriety. And I had been sober for 11 years. And, at this time, since being in LA, I wasn't able to really paint because I was mostly homeless.
Mm.
Hadn't even thought about photography by that time. I wasn't creating. But then I got sober and I got a job at the Hollywood Bowl as a busboy. And then I was promoted to a server that year, which I was making a ton of money, doing very well, going to meetings, doing the whole thing. Found a place in Hollywood and then moved to my apartment in Victoria Park. Got my first car, an 84 Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme. I loved that car. It was a great car.
Nice.
Billy, I called her. After 11 years, had a relapse that almost killed me. And I knew I was about to lose everything. So I snitched on myself and checked into sober living. And while in sober living, I don't have to go to work because they gave me time off.
Mm.
And so I painted a lot, profusely. And it was early in 2014 is when they named me one of the 40 Black artists to watch in the Grio, based on the Crack series that I shot and shown at
Got
the
it.
first exhibit.
Got it. Wow, it's a impressive turnaround, to say the least. I find it interesting that you went from almost taking your life, but today you're all about supporting life. And I just think it's an amazing turnaround. And that's why I was asking you a bit about kind of that transformation, because like I've seen how you treat my children when we've come to dine in your home. I've seen what you do for the homeless and how you provide them with clothing, and I just hear it in things you say on and off, like when we're walking around or when I was at your gallery opening, and it to me, what comes out of you is this support for life and support for others' lives, like, and it's very front and center, like it's there, like it's a purpose that you're driving, and I just think I don't even know if there's a question in there. I just think it's amazing that you had that switch, that you're all about supporting other people's lives, and your life is very healthy right now, and that turnaround from where you were is incredible.
I think we get to, if we're lucky, things didn't happen to me. The drugs, the homelessness, none of that happened to me. All of that happened for me, because what that experience gave me, being a homeless drug addict in the streets of New York, DC, and LA, showed me how one could be dehumanized and discarded and left out because of something they may be going through or experiencing. So those things were given to me, learning how to be empathetic, how to genuinely care about somebody else, a stranger. who you may never see again, to give them literally the shirt off of your back, because they're cold and you have other shirts in your closet at home. So that it's not a big thing to keep socks and gloves and hats at my front door. It doesn't cost a lot to be kind. It just doesn't.
I like that. It doesn't cost a lot to be kind.
Mm.
Well, you're setting a great example.
Thank you.
All right. We have a commercial break.
Okay.
Always my favorite part of things. Here we go. This podcast is sponsored by the North Sea. And because I love the sea, I want to tell you a story of a storm chaser. His name, Joseph Millard William Turner. Born in 1775, he became one of Britain's greatest landscape painters. Turner famously had himself lashed to a ship's mast for 4 hours in the middle of a violent sea storm. Not to survive it, but to study it, the light, the chaos, the overwhelming force of nature at its most unforgiving. And then he went home and painted it. Snowstorm, steamboat off a harbor's mouth. Critics dismissed it as a swirling mess of nothing. But Turner didn't care. He wasn't interested in what a storm looked like. He was obsessed with how it felt, how it moved, and how it swallowed him. What he left behind wasn't just a misunderstood painting. It was a foundational blueprint for abstract expressionism, a movement that wouldn't arrive for another 100 years. Turner's Storm arrived way before its time, and if you find yourself in London, I'd recommend you go visit the painting in person at the Tate Modern. That's my commercial break.
Awesome.
I don't really have any commercials, but I like to take a little break, let you breathe a
No,
little
that was
bit.
really kind of awesome because, how are you going to record life if you don't experience it?
It's fun to share,
Yeah, that's a great story. Thank you. I'm going to definitely check that out.
Okay, great. Do you think that suffering makes for better art?
I think that suffering informs aspects of you in a different way than not suffering does. And that information translates into your work. I don't think that you're required to cut off your ear to be a great artist. And I don't think you're required to, OD or be homeless to be a great artist. But I do think that you have to be able to feel deeply to be a great artist. And I think that most artists are drug addicts or cut off their ear or masochistic in some ways because we vibrate at a different frequency that's incongruent with this matrix. And so trying to navigate between that creative self and conscious self sometimes comes into conflict, which causes suffering. Most artists, I think, are in some ways empathic, which puts you at odds with the outside world, outside of your creation, which causes suffering. I think there's invariably going to be suffering. I think an artist uses it differently than a normal person, hopefully.
Yeah.
But I don't think you're required to be to suffer to be an artist.
I thought you answered it really nicely in that it's not required to it's not required to suffer, but if you go through something, it informs your work. And usually if you go through something that's hard but difficult, it's something that could be felt and transferred. So I thought that was nice. Do you think that being an artist is lonely?
That's a great question. Could we pause really quickly? I have to go to the bathroom.
I know.
I have to pee.
These are long. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to stop the recording until you come back, and then we'll hit the record again.
Perfect.
All right, cool. All right. So before we stepped out for a quick break, I was just asking you, is is being an artist lonely?
Is being an artist lonely? It can be for me. It has been for me in certain degrees. I think that, and I can't speak for all artists in this question. I can't answer for all of us, but I think that we're complicated people to be with. I think in part because you are empathic in a way and you feel so much. I think that our energy is at a different frequency, not better or worse than, but just different than normal people.
Let's see, how do you phrase it? Were you less lonely when you were homeless than as an
No,
artist? No.
no, being homeless was a different loneliness. That was a different,
Mm.
and more profound in that I wasn't even available for me. So no one else could be. I was self-loathing, self-sabotaging, and pain and darkness. So I was lonely, even longing for my own presence.
Got it. Would you say that you are never without light?
Yes, I would say I'm never without light.
And 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 why is that?
My life should have ended at least 19 times, and I believe it did end once, and I was sent back. I've picked out of garbage cans to eat. I've slept on streets. I've slept in abandoned buildings where literally rats crawled over my flesh. And yet I'm not just here still, but I'm here in a beautiful and amazing way. I can affirm that I am never without light because I've been in the dark and I know what that looks like.
Well, I see you facing the light straight on,
Yeah,
and
thank you.
it's a good look.
Thank you.
It's a good
I
look.
like it. I like it.
Let's take another commercial break.
Mhm.
Give you a break. Take a sip of water if you'd like.
And I'll be back in the bathroom.
Yeah, that's true. I know. I have to stay away from my water too. All right, here we go. This podcast is brought to you by sodium chloride, commonly known as rock salt. When a snowstorm hits, like it did here in New York, a lot of sodium chloride is spread on streets and sidewalks so things don't slip. Sodium chloride is salt, just like the stuff we put on our food. But don't think about switching them because that industrial rock salt could contain trace amounts of arsenic or anti-caking agents. That's right, anti-caking agents, which sounds no bueno for our body's inner highway. Industrial sodium chloride. It keeps you on your feet. Just don't put it on your meat.
Mm,
All right. Ready to continue?
yes.
I'd like to know, like, after you've been through so much, what the word home means to you now.
I could say something flowery like home is where the heart is kind of thing.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
Okay, let me ask you one other thing then.
Mhm.
When I came to your home, I felt it. Like it's a great, like your home is great. Um and also the first thing you said when we walked in the door, I came with my younger children, and you said, the moment you cross this doorway,
That's my one rule.
this is also your home.
I have one house rule. I have one house rule. When you come into this space, you are at home. And I guess after all of the transitions and places I've been through and things that I've been through, I wanted to construct an environment that felt like a hug,
Mm.
that felt welcoming to everyone who comes in. I wanted to create a place that facilitated life and creativity. So, I have my plants that are like my jungle and my kids, I call them my kids. I wanted to create a space where everyone felt welcome. I wanted to create a hug, and that's my home.
That's a nice way to put it. I also witnessed a ritual when I came to your house, and that is that you send everyone home with a piece of art, which I thought was very, very
First
nice.
time here. Yeah, the first time here.
Oh, first time here. So,
Yeah,
so first time in your home, you go home with a piece of art. I have
yeah.
it proudly framed and hanging on my wall.
Mhm,
Very,
mhm,
thank you very much.
yeah.
All right. Can you think of an artist that has really broken the rules and in doing so changed the course of art?
Well, the most obvious to me would be Basquiat because he really just followed his own path in terms of how he became inducted into the art world, doing the graffiti in the Samo. He
And
left his dad's house. I think he was like 17. He was just living on the streets of New York City and Washington Square Park. I
yeah.
think he dated Madonna briefly, but he was just doing more graffiti work, tagging up these obscure poems throughout the city and in front of galleries.
Hmm.
And then that kind of you know, got him into the world. And I think with Basquiat, like Van Gogh to me, Vincent Van Gogh, Vincent and Jean Michel, I think, are two of my favorite artists, not just because of their body of work and their legacy, but their stories. Jean Michel was a graffiti artist, like this homeless black kid living on the street who created work and became Jean Michel Basquiat. And what I loved about Vincent van Gogh is, Vincent van Gogh only sold one of his own paintings in his lifetime, and that was to his brother Theo. And, he was dished and panned and criticized. Oh, you suck, Vincent. Your work will never sell. You're a horrible artist. But he never stopped painting.
Hmm.
You know, he understood, I think, what he had to do as a living being in terms of creating his work and not acquiescing to accommodate someone else's taste, that he created his work.
Yeah. All right. That's it. We made it, my friend.
All right.
Thank you
Great
so
job, man.
much.
It's been a pleasure.
As I said to you, our lives have been bookended.
Hmm.
We we knew each other when we were 4, and we said goodbye to each other when we were 9. Oh,
Hmm.
I looked at it. We found that arrowhead, and so I thought it would be so cool. I don't have the arrowhead. I wish I did,
Oh, okay. I was
but
like, oh my
when you when
God.
you said your stripper name was Hard Rock. Oh, no, it was Onyx, right? Because it
Mhm.
was a Hard Rock. So I'm like, oh my God, wouldn't that be cool if the arrowhead we found was made out of onyx? But I went and I did some research, and most arrowheads from the West Coast in the California area are made of obsidian, not onyx. So I'm like, oh darn it, because it would have been a great, great full circle. Anyway,
Well,
I,
Obsidian
I
would have been a great stripper name too. Ladies and gentlemen, coming to the stage, Obsidian.
obsidian. Yeah. So it's interesting because yeah, we said goodbye when we were 9, and then we met again recently when I moved
Yeah.
back to New York, and we connected first on text and then in
Hmm.
person.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I feel like we've known each other for that whole time,
Yeah.
even though we weren't close. We it feels close. So
It's the connection, not the closeness, not the proximity, but the connection.
it's the connection. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah. Anyway, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for being a stand up person.
Thank you.
A generous person. You were fantastic with my kids, and I hope we get to hang out a lot more
Oh, no,
in the
absolutely.
future. Anyway, you make
Yeah.
the world a better place, and you have a big
So do you,
part,
brother.
and
Thank you.
I appreciate you.
You too, baby.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Wow, what a great interview. Thanks again to Sage Gallen. That was incredible. And I just want to say, if any of you are writing out your personal storm, stick with it and stay strong. I mean, Sage went through a lot, and he came out the other side. He came out great. So hang in there. You'll get through it as well. There's a lot of light on the other end. All right. Our interviews are done, and that means one thing. It means we've reached the beginning of the end. Now, We'd love to hear from you. It's always great to hear your voice. I love that more than reading emails. We've got a phone number. Yeah, it's 646-580-0450. And if you're calling from overseas, that's a +1 646-580-0450. All right. One quote for you. Oh, no, it's not a quote. I got one stat for you. There are about 100 lightning strikes on Earth every second. I said every second. That's about 8 to 9 million lightning strikes a day. Now, a lot of those lightning strikes, they happen out at seas and oceans, so we don't have to confront them. But it does lead me to my final story. And that's the story of an old fisherman and the young apprentice. Now, the two of them were out at sea. They were getting ready to set their nets when they noticed a dark and foreboding storm coming their way. And yes, there were lots of lightning strikes that they could see. The old man, he furrowed his brow and he was angry, and he's just like, he knew he wasn't going to be fishing today. And in that anger, his strong hands, they ripped the fishing net he was holding. And this caught the young apprentice by surprise. And he hadn't seen this temper in the old man before. And he waited a while, and then he finally said, Sir, if you rip a hole in your net, you will have less holes. And the old man, he thought about this, and he thought for a good time. It wasn't until those dark clouds and the cold rain were hugging the boat that he finally said something. And he handed the young apprentice the net that he had torn. And he said to him, look through this hole into the surrounding darkness. And if you look long enough into that storm, you will see that all roads clearly lead to art. And the young apprentice scratched his head. He's like, what are you talking about, old man? But he was respectful, and he knew that the old man was wise. And so he did. He took that net, and he looked through that large hole, and he looked into the darkness. And he looked, and he looked. And what he saw, he did not speak of. After some time, the rain was coming down even harder, and they had to pedal back. And they finally got to shore, and they were wet, and they were tired. And the young apprentice set to work right away. He set to work repairing the net, as a good apprentice should do. And as he started to sew it back together, he noticed things. He noticed that the ripped edges didn't come back together the way they did before. The knots were different. The holes, they were different sizes. Things were asymmetrical, imperfect, even scarred. But somehow, this made the net much more interesting to the young apprentice. And he stared at it, and he stared some more. And then finally, after some time, he got up, and he took the net with him, and he went home. And from that day on, he was no longer a fisherman. This is Art Nomad, and we salute that young man. Till next time, keep wandering and keep your nets asymmetrical.